biggest geek good news story of 2018 so far is the blockbuster success of Black Panther. It was a worldwide phenomenon. Plus, thousands of African American kids packed movie theaters to finally see a superhero who looks like them. Now, Marvel and DC are putting diverse characters in the spotlight, and even tweaking old favourites. So I headed to San Diego Comic-Con to soak up the inclusive vibes. But I soon learned that for some, the good old days of comics are fading away.
Presently, there's a lot of contention around political and social commentary being interjected into modern media. Either you don't notice, you agree with it, or you think it's become far more pervasive than previously. The notion that social commentary doesn't exist in modern media is untenable. It is true that social commentary has always existed in media. That is undeniable. However, I think politics being injected into media is becoming more pervasive and conspicuous. In fact, I think social commentary used to be so well done that it was hardly ever noticed, or it provided commentary on universal principles and ideas that anyone who was a decent person could agree with. Even if you noticed and disagreed with the underlying commentary and themes, at least you could understand why people could hold these ideas. What's annoying about social and political commentary in today's movies, comics, video games, and TV shows is that it is far too conspicuous, and that the ideas being injected are presumed to be right by the creators despite the fact they often are not. Sometimes the issue is that the social commentary is so out of place that it is distracting. Not every black character in a piece of entertainment that isn't explicitly about black issues needs the black character to point out that they're black and have a unique perspective or experience because they are black. What's even more frustrating is when social commentary presents the opposition in the least generous way possible, and it's very clearly supposed to parallel real life. Here are two examples of movies that either have on-the-nose commentary where they misrepresent opposing views, or the commentary was out of place. In the Purge election year, one of the main characters with the right ideas is part of a diverse political party whose color is blue. And who are the bad guys? Well, it's the political party who are represented by the color red, which is filled with rich, white, church-going traditionalists who want to preserve the status quo. The Purge series has always had social commentary, but the social commentary was relatable, subtle, and it was done well and hidden in the premise. The Purge touched on issues of class. However, the movie didn't judge people because they were part of a particular class. The movie didn't demonize rich people. In fact, one of the central themes of the movie was that both envy and entitlement are harmful despite your class. By the end of the movie, you don't even realize that there was social commentary. In The Purge Anarchy, the central theme is about how revenge can eat you alive. Even if you're somebody that thinks revenge is justifiable morally, it still doesn't insult you for revenge. It's a sympathetic narrative. Let's move on to Star Wars. It is a fact that Star Wars had political and social commentary in it, but it was subtle. Even though in the prequels, one of the characters was named after a Republican senator, but that's besides the point. Did you get that the Ewoks were analogous to the Vietnamese people and or the Native Americans? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. The Mandalorian Season 2 did a great job drawing parallels to superpowers invading foreign nations without demonizing anybody. In fact, Bill Burr's character doesn't demonize the soldiers of the Empire. In fact, he's quite upset that he lost a lot of good friends in a pointless war. Obviously, the Empire is analogous to Nazi Germany. However, in the context of when the original trilogy was made, World War II was still relatively fresh in everyone's mind, and insinuating that entire demographics of people are Nazis wasn't as popular as it is today. Also, in reality, the Empire is a stand-in for any oppressive tyrannical government in history. You could easily argue that the Empire is like the Soviet Union. I've always been under the belief that the Empire was analogous to the British Empire. The Rebel Alliance is very analogous to the rebels of the American Revolution. You can even find people exhibiting the similarities between the Galactic Empire and Imperial Japan. Yes, Princess Leia and Lando Calrissian were made for diversity reasons, but it's pretty simple why no one cares. They are good characters. Their personalities don't revolve around them being a woman or a black guy in powerful positions. Princess Leia isn't just a damsel in distress, and the princess, she is a badass, she's intelligent, and she is a powerful woman. But she's not perfect or flawless, and she doesn't need to demean a whole sex just to raise herself up. In fact, it's okay that she entrusts men to join the Rebel Alliance, and it's okay that she falls in love with a man, and it's okay that she idolizes certain men in her life, just like certain men idolize her in this context in the story. And no one noticed because they didn't care. Lando didn't need to bring up his race, he had charm, and you were intrigued by him. However, in the sequels, in Episode 8, specifically, you get this out-of-place scene where Tico frees a bunch of animals in captivity. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, what about the human slaves? There's this forced scene about war profiteering, which could be interesting in the right Star Wars movie, but this was included in a scene that is pretty much an inconsequential side quest anyway. Once we're closer to the end, there's this forced message from Rose Tico that we don't defeat what we hate by killing it or destroying it. And I was thinking, where the hell did that come from? We can have fantastic conversations about the ethics of pacifism and violence being the solutions to the world's problems, and Star Wars has touched on that in the past. But in this movie, it was so poorly executed that it was cringy and it was noticeable and it did not fit with the tone of the movie or even the universe. Rey is a great example of female characters being written poorly. She's better than everyone else, and her sex is highlighted in The Last Jedi. Even commentary that's on the nose can still be good. In the original Dawn of the Dead, directed by George A. Romero, the underlying social commentary was about consumerism and the zombie-like state that overabundance causes. Is the social commentary a bit hypocritical? Sure. Is the social commentary on the nose? Sure. But despite the social commentary being on the nose, it didn't distract from the fact that the movie is about survivors holding up in a mall during a zombie apocalypse. For decades, horror movies have been vehicles for social commentary. In 1968, director George A. Romero's genre-defining zombie film, Night of the Living Dead, served, perhaps inadvertently, as a parable about American racism. Its 70s sequel, Dawn of the Dead, tackled soulless consumerism and suburban ennui. By the time the series reached the George W. Bush era, with 2005's Land of the Dead, Romero transformed the unending war between humans and zombies into a darkly comic riff on class division and wartime propaganda. His movies were tense, gory affairs about a fantastical otherworld in which the shuffling, flesh-eating undead regularly chased terrified civilians through homes and roads and shopping malls. They were also about the very particular, very normal real world that he and his viewers lived in. Romero was far from the only director to inject political consciousness into genre filmmaking. In the 1980s, John Carpenter directed a string of beloved genre films, The Thing, Escape from New York, They Live, that reflected his left-leaning sensibilities. One thing the article doesn't mention is that while The Thing and Escape from New York were certainly influenced by John Carpenter's left-leaning sensibilities, those movies starred John Carpenter's good friend Kurt Russell, who is right-leaning. John Carpenter and Kurt Russell are kind of a power couple who both not only share camaraderie, but also film. Therefore, I think it's imperative to make note that the movies, which had social commentary previously, even if stemming from faulty beliefs, are still formed around universal principles and objective morality that comport to reality. This is why Kurt Russell and John Carpenter, despite coming from the opposite political spectrum, are able to come together and make a movie which has John Carpenter's left-wing sensibilities, because when you are aiming at something that is morally objective and that is based on some sort of universal principle, it can be agreed upon by most people. More recently, horror has tackled issues like familial trauma and mental health, Ari Aster's Hereditary, and domestic violence, Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man, shading and sharpening prosaic horrors with genre thrills and chills, and thanks in large part to Jordan Peele, whose Get Out and Us directly overlaid the experience of present-day American racism onto horror tropes, the genre has continued to engage with issues of race and discrimination. Part of what made these movies effective was the balance between genre thrills and social commentary, the way that each enabled and expanded the possibilities of the other. As big-budget Hollywood studio filmmaking has drifted away from socially and culturally engaged stories and concepts, except in the most superficial way, modestly budgeted horror movies have become one of the few places where these sort of ideas are consistently explored in popular feature films. Indeed, it is now almost more surprising to see a horror picture that does not attempt some sort of social commentary. It is only a little bit of an overstatement to say that horror has become Hollywood's op-ed page. As a matter of fact, social commentary and philosophical themes embroidered in history's greatest cinema is what inspired me to develop Movie Libertas. There are films that have been released which contain social commentary in tandem with an enthralling story and great cinematography, which are retroactively mentioned as a pretext by political and social activists, deflecting criticism away from their insufferable habit of interjecting their views. These creative types, if we're using the word creative loosely, don't see media as art or a vehicle for good stories. They see entertainment strictly as a platform for their agenda. Can movies be used specifically for social commentary and still be good? By my opinion, yes. Doing that is fine. People are allowed to do whatever they want. Should movies avoid social commentary? Of course not. Perhaps these creative types should moderate a bit. Perhaps story should take precedence over social commentary. Or maybe the Daily Wire route is the best way to balance the perpetual social commentary permeating its way into a significant number of movies. Although it's not all bad, at least there's a counter movement, and fortunately, at least right now, not all movies feature blatant social and political activism.